Welcome to the jungle, everyone. I'm your host, Kyle Phelps, and this is the Power Rankings video for Week 12. I'd just like to ask if you wouldn't mind to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. It really helps me out, and you get to tell YouTube how awesome I am. It's a win-win. Okay, but seriously, we've got previews and recaps for Cincinnati Bengals games that even neutral fans love every single week. We've also got these weekly power rankings that we do every single week to give the rest of the NFL some love. And on Wednesdays and Saturdays, you can always catch me posting some of my favorite clips from my other channel, the Battle of Ohio podcast. You'll need to go subscribe to that channel if you want the full content that we put out over there. It's basically me and Thomas Stargell, who's a Browns fan. We go through the weekly list of events for the Bengals-Browns rivalry, and we basically just cover that rivalry as it kind of develops and comes back into prominence. But I'll post some of the best Bengals-only content from that show over here as well. Over here, though, we've got you taken care of with a full slate of weekly content that you are not going to want to miss. So these power rankings ended up a little wacky. There's so many upsets and so much movement this year that you're probably going to be a little shocked where I have some of these teams placed. Just remember that it is a week-to-week league, and I very much treat these power rankings as a week-to-week experience. It's all about the power! And that power fluctuates constantly. As always, I do cover every team in these power rankings, but for the sake of time, we run through the teams really quickly. We try to focus more so on like the overall categories that they're placed in. That way, everyone gets a little love. So let's go ahead and kick things off with the tank time category. It's the lowest tier of my power rankings. Mainly, we're dealing with the teams whose seasons are going so badly that I think they might as well just start tanking and focusing on draft positioning. Obviously, teams never do that in real life. But we're gonna pretend that they do, just for the sake of distinguishing how bad teams in this category really are. We're gonna start off with the Detroit Lions at number 32. They haven't been at 32 all season, but they've been on and off number 32, and they've been at 32 for a few weeks now. They remain winless this week despite a valiant effort against the Browns from the defense. Jared Goff is still god-awful, and I basically have no faith in him to take this team anywhere at this point. They just need to get rid of him and his contract ASAP if they want to build anything in Detroit. Next, we got the New Jersey Jets, who are down one spot from 30 last week. Zach Wilson cannot come back soon enough, because the Mike White experience is basically dead and over, and Flacco is depressing. But hey, at least the defense didn't give up a catastrophic number of points this week. At 30, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are down a spot from 29 last week. I think this team does have some future because they flashed it from time to time this season. Maybe Urban Meyer is in the process of learning how to be a pro coach instead of a college coach. Either way, they got smacked by the 49ers this week, so they ain't going anywhere in the power rankings. At 29, it's the Atlanta Falcons, who are down 2 spots from 27 last week. And I'll admit, I got fooled. I had them just outside of the playoff hopefuls category a couple of weeks ago. But it's the Falcons. They always do this. They pretend they're good, and then they remind you that you were a fool for ever believing in them. Maybe they'll be good one day. They almost were until, well, you know. Last in this category is the Miami Dolphins, who are staying put at 28. I'm a little conflicted having them in tank time. Maybe I should have given them a boost for beating the Jets, just so I could get them out of the tank time category, because they're definitely bad enough to be a tank time team. But they don't have a first-round pick to actually tank for this year. I really think Tua should request a trade in the offseason, because he's clearly talented, and they're not willing to commit to him or do what it takes to surround him with the kind of talent that he needs. Next category, we got the bad teams. Teams that are not quite bad enough to tank, but they ain't going anywhere this year either. At most, you're hoping to build a bit of momentum going into next year. Kind of reminds me of the way that the Bengals were in the 90s. Well, the late 90s, not the early 90s. They were never really competitive, but they had some pieces that you hope to build around by going on runs at the end of the year, and always remembering, there's always next year. We're starting off with the Houston Texans at number 27, up 4 spots from number 31. Yeah, they're bad. I don't really see the vision here. I don't really quite see what they're doing, but there is a spark. These Texans have something to them. They're frisky this year. They've only been blown out a few times, and they've been competitive in a lot of their games. Considering the talent, that's more than I expected from them. Number 26 is the New Jersey Giants, who are staying put after a decisive loss to the Buccaneers. Daniel Jones is bad. We knew that already. I think Joe Judge does have the beginnings of a decent football team, but they need a lot of work in the offseason. Maybe a dark horse candidate to go land Aaron Rodgers? Seems like a pipe dream, but you never know. At 25, the Chicago Bears are staying put because, well, frankly, I didn't actually learn anything about this team that would have changed my mind about where they were. They had an opportunity to go beat a tough AFC North opponent in the Ravens, but failed to finish it off because of XYZ reason. 3 weeks ago, the refs played a major hand in the same kind of narrative, but that's not really an excuse. The Bears need to play better, but I do think they still have some potential. Maybe not with Matt Nagy. Sorry. 24 is the Seattle Seahawks, who were down a spot from 23 last week, and yikes. Even with Russell Wilson back, this team is just not going anywhere this year. Tanking is definitely the wrong move because you're probably just going to piss Russ off even more than you already have. And if there's any hope of not being forced to trade him at the end of the season, that would definitely have the opposite effect of what you're trying to go for. Finally, we're going to finish this category at 23 with the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are down from 21. They've been hovering around this area roughly about all season because, quite honestly, I'm not buying them. I know they have a winning record right now, but I didn't buy that cheap-ass comeback attempt that was fraught with lucky bounces and some cheap penalties. I didn't buy their 11-0 start last year. I certainly don't buy their winning record this year. Be honest, with the schedule that they have the rest of the season, do you see this team winning even 3 more games this year? I didn't think so. Moving on to the playoff hunt. Right now, I don't see these teams as part of the playoff picture at the end of the season. But, like I said, this is a week-to-week experiment. There's still plenty of time for these teams to turn things around. Any of these teams could go on a run and displace one of the wild card teams to sneak into the dance. First, it's the Denver Broncos at 22, who are staying put after their bye week. The Broncos have shown you every look you could imagine this year. Good, bad, confusing, muchacho, extra cheese, jalapeno on the side, you name it. I do think this team has the talent to go on a run, and they should absolutely be setting their sights on the playoff race. But if they don't get their act together soon, we could be writing their eulogy before too long. 21, you got the Carolina Panthers, who are down a spot from 20, and they lost to a suddenly hot Washington football team. Cam Newton is an absolute weapon when he has his confidence, so they do have that going for them. For how long, I'm not sure, but I don't really anticipate they'll actually make a successful run ahead of teams like the Saints and the Vikings. At 20 this week, up 4 spots from 24 last week, is the same Washington football team that beat the Panthers. Taylor Heineke's playing really well, although I wonder if they won this game because Ron Rivera knows the perfect formula already for taking down Cam Newton. 19, it's the Raiders, who are down from 17. This team could start free-falling soon, if they're not already doing so. As a Bengals fan, I watched their game this week very closely, and I'm not going to lie, this team looks just about cooked. They have had a rough season as far as personal issues that could affect the locker room, and I think they're just about ready to call it quits on the season and get ready for 2022. Number 18, we got the Saints, who are down 2 spots from 16. I knew the Jameis Winston injury was going to be killer. I took a lot of flack for hesitating to put them any higher on my power rankings after they had those big wins against the big teams. But I think my hesitation was correct. Speaking of which, the 49ers are at 17, up from 18 last week. And I know it's the Jaguars, but the 49ers, they handled business in a game that would have raised a lot of alarm bells if they hadn't. Kyle Shanahan's pretty much coaching for his reputation right now. But despite the weird season, they're sitting right there ready to pounce on a playoff spot if somebody slips. Next up, these are my playoff hopefuls. Only 14 teams can make the playoffs, so obviously they're not all going to get in. I don't consider all of these teams guarantees to make it, but I'd be pretty surprised right now if some combination of these teams didn't end up rounding out the bottom end of the playoff seeding at the end of the season. First up, we got the Philadelphia Eagles at 16, who are up 3 spots from 19. I've been talking a lot recently about how they can vault themselves into the playoff discussion with a few good wins. They have them now, with the Saints being their latest victim. Another win puts them back at 500, and suddenly anything is possible. At 15, we've got the Cleveland Browns, who are staying put at 15 after barely beating the Lions. Normally, I give teams a little bit of a boost for winning, but when you win like that, it's tough. Hell, the Steelers just tied them last week. Number 14, it's the Buffalo Bills. They are taking a massive step down from number 4 last week. And I would just like to take this opportunity to let you guys know that I am not smoking crack. But I do think the Bills are in freefall mode right now. They just got handled by the Jaguars 2 weeks ago, and they're getting bodied by the Colts at home? The Bills better be careful because they got the number 7 seed in the AFC right now. They've lost control of the AFC East. Next up, we got those same Colts at number 13. They're one of the hottest teams in football right now. Not the hottest, but they're one of the hottest teams in football right now. Winners of 5 of their last 6. Not to mention, they came close to beating the Titans a month ago, so it could have been even more than that. I know they don't currently control a playoff spot, but, I mean, come on, they just demolished the Bills, who were currently their biggest competition for one. Number 12 is the Minnesota Vikings, up from 13. They absolutely stunned the world this week by losing to the Green Bay Packers before then beating the Green Bay Packers. It's really confusing, I know, but that's basically what happened. Can you imagine what this Vikings team would be capable of if they knew how to actually close out games? They could be the number 1 seed right now in the NFC. But finally, the Los Angeles Chargers slide in at number 11, up from 12. And despite his inconsistencies, Justin Herbert is still an absolute weapon. They almost tried to choke this game away to the Steelers, but fate had other ideas. They topped the 40-point mark for the second time this season, and they pulled victory from the jaws of defeat, which they had just pulled from the jaws of victory like 2 minutes before that. But point is, they won. Moving along, we've got the Contenders. These teams, I think, are shoo-ins to make the playoffs. I'd be shocked if any of them missed. I also think these teams could potentially be competing for the Super Bowl this year. But at number 10, the Baltimore Ravens are staying put because, honestly, I didn't really learn anything from the Ravens in this game. They did the same weird play down to the opponent style of game that they've been playing all season. Then they ice it away with Tyler Huntley doing his best Lamar Jackson impression. I mean, can Lamar really be the MVP if his team wins the same way every single week, whether he's there or not? Anyway, the Rams are staying in place at 9, coming off their bye week. They've got a pretty average schedule coming off of the bye, and honestly, I don't see any games that they can't win. If they beat the Cardinals in a few weeks, maybe they end up NFC West champions. Who knows? The Cincinnati Bengals are at number 8 because they showed that maturity that they desperately needed to show coming off the bye and learning from the mistakes of the recent losing streak. They handily beat the Raiders, and now they get 3 home games in a row against very beatable teams. Moving up from number 8 last week, it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They ended their losing streak in the most Tom Brady way possible by lighting up an inferior opponent because you're pissed off. Were it not for that one pick in the first half, this would have been a complete and total rout. Blaine Gabbert even came in at the end of the game, despite the fact that that play happened. Can you imagine if it hadn't happened? Blaine Gabbert had been playing the whole second half. Finally, the Dallas Cowboys round out things at number 6. They're down from 3 last week. Now, tell me, how about them Cowboys? Can't even handle the ghost of Kansas City's offense. Dak Prescott is going to want to study that film because, man, he was bad. And then in our final category, we have the Super Bowl caliber teams. Obviously, only 2 can make it, but I expect it to be 2 of these 5. Number 5 is the Tennessee Titans. They were number 1 last week, and they're down 5 this week. Why? Because I thought they had the whole no Derrick Henry thing figured out. Well, that doesn't work when Ryan Tannehill throws 4 picks against the Texans. Now, I don't necessarily think one bad loss, especially this year, is enough to say the Titans are garbage pretenders or anything like that, but my confidence in them is definitely shaken after that game. Green Bay Packers are also down from 2 after losing to the Vikings. Rip Tom Grossi. What happened to that defense, Packers? Looked like the defense was going to carry you to the Super Bowl this year. But then you let Kirk Cousins drop 34 on you and basically win the game after you thought Eric Stokes had caught the interception and he'd won the game. Believe it or not, the Kansas City Chiefs are my number 3 team this week. That's up from 7 last week. Why? Well, they took care of business against the Cowboys, who were number 3 last week. I know everyone wanted to dig their grave a few weeks ago, but guys, they're 7-4. Did everyone think that they were going to go 17-0? The Chiefs are starting to figure themselves out, and that is scary for the rest of the AFC. At number 2, I have the Arizona Cardinals, who were back up from 6 last week. Honestly, the whole reason I had them at 1 a couple of weeks before is because they were showing, like, hey, look, we can go win big games despite not having Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. Well, they went out and did that this week. And I know it's the Seahawks. I know the Seahawks aren't that great this year. So I'm not quite ready to give them that top spot back. But I got my eye on you. And finally, it's the return of the king. The New England Patriots are back on top of the NFL. Obviously not record-wise, but that was because they had that terrible start at the beginning of the season. But I mean, you cannot sit there and tell me with a straight face that you're not terrified of the New England Patriots right now. Bill Belichick is showing that he doesn't need Tom Brady to be a great coach. So let me know what you guys think about the list. Did I rank anybody too high? Did I rank anybody too low? Am I a complete moron? Should I be banned from YouTube forever? Or maybe, just maybe, you liked what you saw. And if that's the case, go ahead and subscribe to the channel because we've got content 5 to 6 days per week depending on what my work schedule is. If you got something to say about the list, go ahead and leave a comment below. If it's a good comment, I'll feature it on my next Power Rankings video. But anyway, y'all can always find more of what I do at KylePhelps92 on Twitter, Facebook.com/ThePhelps, the Battle of Ohio podcast on YouTube, link in the description, the Cincinnati Bengals section on ATBNetwork.com, and right here if you subscribe. If you made it this far, something tells me you liked the video, so I definitely recommend doing that. But, as always, I'll leave y'all with a hootie!